So let's talk about DBMS operation. Basically, when you have so many in any production environment, you will have a lot of tables and the views and the functions procedures. You will also have a bunch of users. So there are two questions coming up. One is, how do you keep track of all the tables and the views and the objects that you created or someone else created? Another is, how do you make sure these objects are accessed properly? If someone from sales department should not look at the inventory, for example, or someone from the warehouse team should not look at the accounting book, right? So these are the things that are reasonable. And we are going to introduce two things here. How do you make sure security is enforced, and how do you check what the objects are there? Now, first thing we are going to talk about is security. SQL has a series of statements that is used to grant or remove privilege to access certain objects. Security basically means who can do what to which object. Who is the identity, the user. You define the user by you define user by using a username. So far we have been using a default installation in which we have a super user, and we have been using this super user all through the course. But in the production system, you will have a whole series of groups, user groups, and place users into different groups, right? As we can see that here, inside each schema, you will have, inside of the table, you have a login groups, like different groups of users. And you will assign user, right now we only have one user, which happens to be the super user Postgres. You can define more users and set them into different groups. You can have an accounting team group. You can have a warehouse team group. You can have a sales and marketing team group. All these groups, right? Now, this is define who, and once you have the user, you will have the username and the password, just like you will access any other system. Now, other than the user, we also have the privilege. And privilege means what you can do to an object. If it's a table, then of course you can you select, can you insert, can you update, can you delete, can you create table or drop table? Similarly to a view, can you do a create view? Can you do drop view? Can you do this is what you would like to see, and then which object, like which table. So if you want to do an insert into a certain table, but maybe there's another table, like historical table, that you don't want people to insert into, like the 2010 year 2010 book already closed. You don't want anybody to make change to it, right? So you would grant insert privilege to the current year's table, but you will remove the privilege of insert to the 2010 table, right? So these are the who, what, which of the security, and all our security definition operation are based on this who, what, which. In SQL, we use a grant and deny or revoke statement to provide or revoke privilege to or from objects. So you can see here, we can do a grant select on representative to Professor Shen, right? We have revoke delete to on a rep to student one, which means student one cannot delete from this rep table, but Professor Shen can select from this table. And let's look at the detailed definition of grant and the revoke. Revoke basically have the same syntax structure as the grant. So we are only going to talk about grant here. You can grant, select, insert, update, delete, truncate, everything on tables, on table name, or for all tables, right? You can also define the exact schema you want to do. And inside the schema, you can also grant create or drop of tables to a certain group name or row, group or row or user, right? Now, this is what we said, what you can do. This is the which table or in which schema, and this is the who. So this is the who, what, which of the security. You can selectively grant select statement, select privilege to one table, and insert and update and delete privilege to another table. And you can also define select the privilege to a view, but revoke the privilege to a certain table. So all these are possible. For functions, you will have grant execute privilege on function, which also makes sense, right? Because function, you are actually running the function. This is execute, and similarly, you will do this to this grant to start procedure, and also similarly, you can do revoke to a certain username and to a certain user and group. So this is security, but then there's also equally important question is how do we check objects? How do we check the life cycle of objects? I create a 10 table, you create a 20 table, he or she create 3,000 tables. How do we make sure we are able to see all these tables? How do we know what tables are in there and what views are defined on top of the tables? All DBMS provides some kind of catalog, which is a series of tables containing all this information. One of the, I'm going to only show you one because one example where we select out all existing tables, right? This is which is a select star from PG catalog.pg tables. These PG tables, Postgres tables, contains all the table. This table contains the information of all tables. And similarly, you can find system catalog tables for views, functions, etc., etc. But the schema here, PG catalog, is the system catalog. It contains tables that which contains the information of all objects inside this database. So when I show you the groups schema, you can see that there are like catalogs and schemas, etc., etc. You can go to those system catalog, try to find the exact table you are containing the information you are looking at. You can even find, similarly, you can also get the monitoring information, the log information, which means what user has been running. And this can be very important because this can provide you with a sight into the performance of your database. You can see that who is running what query. This is also this information is also stored in system catalog. And for all these system catalog tables, you can do a Google. You can check what the tables are there. And remember, these tables are not like fixed. They keep on changing. They may not be changing like every week, but once in a while, once in a year or twice in the year, they do change. They usually adding some new columns, adding some new tables. So I'm not going to give you a full explanation of the tables and the columns, but you need to be aware that this information are readily available. And if you need this information, you can Google a SQL query to see how you can get that information from the database. Then you can run this query and get the information you need.